Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is, and my name is Kathy Benuck. Today, you're watching our series on candidates who are seeking election to local office in Bedford, and the election date is Tuesday, March 11th. And through this series, I'll be interviewing the candidates who are running for the town council, the school board, town clerk, and town moderator. Candidates this year had opportunity to do both this show as well as to do the BCTV produced show that's known as Candidates Corner. And council and school board candidates also had the opportunity to participate in live debates that were sponsored by the Bedford Men's Club. Now, hopefully, all candidates, we would hope, would take at least one opportunity if they wanted you to vote for them. Only two candidates did not respond to my invitations for this show. Town council candidate David Coles and town clerk candidate Courtney Hodgson, I believe is how she pronounces it. Coles did not participate in the town council debate. And as it turns out, I have found out that neither of them participated in the candidate corner debate either. Frankly, I don't know why anyone would vote for them if they don't want to go in front of the public, and that's my editorial comment. Anyway, the Tell It Like It Is series is very different from the Candidate Corner shows because with that show, candidates could choose who they would like to interview them, and there wasn't really any requirement as to how or what questions would be asked of each candidate. On this show, I'm the interviewer. Candidates have no idea what I'm going to ask them, but all of the candidates in any given race will get the same questions. And that, to me, is to be fair to all of the candidates. All shows will be released at the same time, so therefore no candidate gets the benefit of seeing his or her opponent's shows before she does their own show. In addition to the shows being aired on BCTV, they'll also be posted on the show's website, and that, hopefully you remember, is www.bedford. Sorry, I'm giving the wrong one. www.tellitlikeitisnh.com. I almost gave you the TV station one. Candidates did provide their own background information to me. Some were very lengthy and had a lot of detail. Others were very concise and just kind of did bullet points. Now, to keep my introductions as fair as possible to all of the candidates, what I did then was kind of pick out what I thought would be the type of information that you should know about. And also, to be fair, I am making these same remarks at the beginning of each candidate's show so that no candidate will receive less time than another. I will ask all candidates to kind of keep their answers pointed, basically so that all of the questions can be asked and answered, and then candidates later can return to any subject when they have the opportunity to tell you more about themselves to further elaborate on any one of the questions if they so choose. So, having said all of that, the show right now is with one of the school board candidates, and that would be Bill Kassler, also known as Dr. William Kassler. Obviously, he is a doctor, and he received the Meritorious Service Medal for exceptional leadership from the Office of the U.S. Surgeon General. His professional career has included a 24-year service to the United States Public Health Service, 17 years as a physician for the Veterans Administration, and 7 years with the Manchester Community Health Center. He served as president of the New Hampshire Medical Society in 2011, and he's received numerous awards, including awards for leadership from both the March of Dimes and from the Bi-State Primary Care Association. For 7 years, he was a professor at Dartmouth University and was a clinical instructor of medicine at Emory University for 8 years. He's currently a lecturer at both the MIT Sloan School of Management and at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. Bill and his family have resided in Bedford for 16 years. One child is currently a student at Bedford High School, and 2 others have already graduated and moved on to the next stage. Bill's community service is very wide, and it includes serving on the board of the Bedford Education Foundation, being a member of the Curriculum Committee of the Bedford School Board, and also a member of its Wellness Committee. For 8 years, he has served as a cardigan trip chaperone, and for 4 years, a mentor to the Bedford High School first robotics team. And on top of all that, he spent 7 years as a girls soccer coach for the Bedford Recreational League, is a Boy Scout leader for Troop 414, as well as a merit badge counselor. And for 4 years, he's coordinated that wonderful annual Scouting for Food drive. So, with no further ado, thank you so much for taking the time out of a crazy schedule like that to be with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, I'm delighted you could make it, especially for those of you who will see this in a few days. We are in the middle of a bad snowstorm again.
What news, New England for you.
Yeah, really. Well, as I said, I'm going to shoot through the questions now, and your opponents are hearing them the same way. And I guess the first thing I would ask you is, are you familiar with Common Core? Do you know what it is?
I am familiar with Common Core,
okay.
Yes.
Are you aware of the concerns and the obligations and such that surround it?
I'm not an educational expert, but I certainly read the paper. I'm very aware of the political debate and the controversy.
The oppositions, okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to know. Now, do you feel, knowing that there is so much controversy, do you think that Bedford might have been a little too hasty getting into it when so many questions remain unanswered about it?
Common Core is a national initiative.
It is.
That the state signed on to.
Yes.
So it really came down on high from the state to
Which is
Bedford.
one of the objections, of course.
So as we're considering what can Bedford do and what does the school board do and what does the administration do, I think we have to look at what authority we have and what our degrees of freedom are. And in this particular situation, we had no choice. So I would say that Bedford has approached this in the best way it can, by taking a look at what we know, by being open and flexible and trying to figure out how to respond when those mandates come through.
Okay. Well, I guess my point would be there was not a mandatory date for implementation, and Bedford, I believe, is one of the first ones in the state to actually start implementing. But there are some options. Manchester, for example, is engaged in one of the options, and that's developing their own standards.
Well, it's unclear how the Board of Education in Manchester will figure this out. It's not at all clear that the board will allow Manchester to be waived from the requirement for the Smarter Balance exam. So I do think that when we look at implementation of Common Core, we have to look at 3 different things. We have to look at the standards.
Right.
We have to look at the measurement and assessment.
Right.
And then we have to look at the curriculum.
Right.
So the standards are national standards, and we don't have a say in that. That's just out of Bedford's determination. The second thing is the measurement, the assessment. That's, I believe there are 2 tests in the country, and New Hampshire has opted for the Smarter Balance one. It's a private vendor.
Right.
We don't have a choice in that. So we have to use that assessment. But where Bedford does have a choice on is implementing a curriculum. We have a fabulous curriculum right now. We have no idea at this point what that Smarter Balance test looks like. My understanding is it's still in development. So it makes sense to wait and see how well we do on that and what the options are in terms of responding to that, and not necessarily immediately throw out a curriculum or redo another curriculum. There are so many unknowns around Common Core that I would applaud the school board, and I would applaud Tim Mays and Chip McGee in terms of going slow and taking an attitude of let's cross that bridge when we come to it.
Well, I guess I'd just follow up saying you probably are aware that some states have pulled out of it. Some states never signed on to it. And then, of course, in New Hampshire, there are a lot of wild cards at the moment because there's a lot of legislation dealing with it.
And I would just say...
Is there legislation likely to repeal it in New Hampshire? I wouldn't know. Right. You know, I don't know if anybody has that answer, but it's a possibility.
And again, I would say that that's a state-level issue, and that my focus as a school board member would be on what Bedford can do, the choices we have, and how we can assure that the disruptions of Common Core are minimized and any opportunities that Common Core has are maximized.
Well, should, for instance, the state say we're out or the legislature say, that's it, you know, you're not going any further. And one of the concerns I have is that money already spent on it essentially will kind of go down that chute. And that concerns me a lot.
My understanding is that we have been very smart in Bedford, that we haven't invested a lot of money towards a Common Core specific curriculum. We haven't bought Common Core books. We haven't done a lot of professional...
I believe they have. Yeah, I think they've had to, because it is being implemented in the schools.
Well, again, I think...
now, granted, books have to be replaced all the time. So, I mean, that would certainly not be the sole issue.
Exactly. And so your concern about whether we invest money that ultimately doesn't go towards improving education is a very valid one. And that's part of the role of the school board, to have that oversight to make sure that doesn't happen.
All right. Okay. But I'm glad you're aware of the controversy, because I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And it seems the more people learn, the bigger the controversy is getting, you know? Okay, this is sort of a three-part question. International Baccalaureate, from its inception in Bedford, has remained a source of controversy. Not as much maybe now as before, but still controversy. Although more kids are taking the IB courses, I believe, with each successive year, the number of the kids taking the actual exams hasn't really seen a big growth. And in fact, as you know, last year there was even something on the ballot, a ballot initiative related to that, to give direction to the school board. Should we, having said all that, should we be continuing to add, this is where the parts come in, more IB courses and teachers, as in the new budget? Is IB the most effective use of our tax dollars when it benefits a fairly small percentage of the total high school population? And should the cost of AP and IB tests be borne by taxpayers, as has been suggested by some school advocates? So those are the three parts.
All right, let me see if I can keep them straight. But first,
should we add more IB courses and teachers?
But let me first offer my approach to IB.
Okay.
I am an enthusiastic, I am an enthusiastic and unapologetic supporter of the International Baccalaureate.
Okay.
Both of my two eldest children went through the full IB diploma program, and it served them extremely well.
Did they take the exams?
Yes, they did.
Good, good. Because a lot of them don't, as you know.
And so I'd also like to respectfully push back a little bit.
No, go right ahead. I want you to.
You say it only benefits a few people, and
well, no, a small percentage.
Well, again, if you look at the number of students who actually take the full IB diploma, there are roughly around 50 kids in the last 2 years of the track who are on board for an IB diploma. But if you look at the number of children who actually take an IB course, that's more like a third of the student body actually takes an IB course. So they benefit from that high-level instruction. Then you also have to look at how many of the teachers get that additional professional development training. It's very good for recruitment of high-level teachers. It's very good for retention. And the rest of the student body get collateral benefits from that professional development and from the IB. So I would argue that it touches more than just those 50-some-odd kids who take the full IB diploma program. So
then you'd be answering to the question, is it an effective use of our tax dollars? I have to take it that your answer would be yes.
The IB diploma and, the IB courses and the advanced placement or the AP courses are the high level of instruction that I think we want for our children. Are they? I'm not arguing that you say yes or no. I'm just assuming that you would think it's a good use of money. I'm a supporter of both AP and IB. Absolutely. If I was equivocal, let me restate that. Yeah, right.
Now, do you think, as has been floated by at least a couple of people, publicly. One of the reasons that has been said some kids don't take the IB tests are because of the cost. So there has been a suggestion made by a couple of folks that the costs of all the testing should be picked up by the taxpayers. Do you agree?
I'm not sure I'm familiar enough with the issues about what's holding the kids back.
Well, that's
Certainly,
what they say is one of the reasons.
again,
Yeah, the school administration has said that. In fact, I think they said it here on my show one time.
my initial approach would be I'm skeptical of that. I don't
Okay.
necessarily think that that type of public subsidy of those exams, I mean, we don't do it for the SATs and we
Correct.
don't do it for the
Yeah.
AP. Why would
Yeah.
you do it for the IB?
Correct.
That being said, a potential idea of having a scholarship, of looking at those families in need that really can't afford it, I would hate to see student with tough family economic circumstances being held back from that opportunity. So I would potentially hope that there could be a scholarship available if there isn't already, but I'm not familiar.
I honestly don't know if somebody can apply. I mean, I know we do have ways of taking care of, and very politely and, you know, with no humiliation or anything
Right.
to anybody, we do have in Bedford means of helping families that can't afford any number of different things.
So,
So that,
again,
I mean,
private,
that may already be happening. I don't know.
and neither do I. But again, there's private sources.
Right,
There
right.
may be it may be appropriate to kick in some public funding for scholarships. That's a different debate, and it's sort of a hypothetical. And
Right.
I'm not. I don't have a particular.
Yeah, no, I didn't float the idea, but I'm just curious what other people think about it. You
Sure.
know? And this can be very short answers that we make it through all of them.
Okay.
There is talk, I believe this plan, that after the election whole process is over and such, the school board is very interested in supplying iPads. And the ultimate goal is 7th grade through 12th grade, but I don't believe they're starting with all of the grades at once. Do you think that's a good idea, and do you think those are essential to education?
First of all, I'm not sure if you have that right. As a parent, I was told that they were thinking about asking parents to pay for Chromebooks, not iPads.
Chromebooks, okay.
So that's a different technology.
Okay.
And again, I think the implication is that the idea being floated is that parents would have to purchase that for their children.
I do
which
understand
is very
there
different
would
from
be.
using taxpayer
Yeah.
dollars to just
Well,
purchase iPads.
I do understand there would be subsidy, though, to, again, children whose families were in a financial situation that was difficult.
So if you look at the issue of the technology,
Yeah.
we are in a highly technical world. There are advantages of having technology that is accessible to students.
Okay.
There are advantages of having family responsibility towards that.
Okay.
And there are advantages of standardizing the type of technology, like a Chromebook, which is, my understanding is, it's a relatively inexpensive but adequate machine for the job, that all of the students would have the same level of technology, and that the schools could put some controls onto that to make sure that that was used appropriately. So without seeing the full report, without understanding the details, I couldn't in advance tell you what I thought, but the idea has some merit, and my understanding is there'll be a report back to the school board with the details, and at that point, it's worthwhile to consider.
Okay. Good answer. Now, as you know, I'm sure, because you seem like you've stayed up on everything, there was a scholarship program established that was funded by voluntary business contributions, and in return, of course, they got a little bit of a tax break. And that program, for the listeners who may not remember it, helped finance some tuition costs, not big grants, I mean relatively modest grants, and they were means tested to the recipients for families that might have a child who just wasn't flourishing in a school for whatever reason in a public school. And the scholarship money could be used to either help pay tuition in a neighboring public school or a private school, or if they were homeschooling, I believe they could get up to maybe $500 or something in that vicinity to purchase books and such. As you know, there were a lot of people who didn't like it, that program, and they believed that this was an inappropriate use of tax money. And of course, the counter argument was, well, it was never tax money to begin with. It's fallen, so I mean, you know, which comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of argument. Now, I'm sure you know that a lower court took that particular position. Money's been frozen and so on, and now it will be a higher court who will decide all this. Do you think that it is, and the advocates also are charged with being against public schools. And I mean, there are some people, including here in Bedford, who have gone so far as to say that these folks are trying to destroy the public school system if they support something like this. So again, it's kind of a little bit of a mixed question. Oh, wow, is the time going? Do you perceive that as tax money being used inappropriately? And I mean, do you think the support for it is only coming from people who hate public education?
So personally, I believe in school choice. I am a passionate defender of public education. I'm a product of public schools, as was as were all three of my children. But there are options. There are religious schools, there are private schools, there are charter schools, and every family has to choose what's right for their children. And I'm a firm believer of that. So we have this bill for scholarships. It is a state bill. It's not anything that Bedford has any say over or any control over.
No control over it. Bedford certainly lobbied against it.
So then the issue becomes this court case. My understanding is that the lower court ruled that the money was public money used to support religious schools. And there's something in our Constitution called, I believe it's the Blaine Amendment, that prohibits that explicitly. So it will likely go to the Supreme Court. It'll be very interesting to see how the Supreme Court rules. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a constitutional scholar. I wouldn't dream of predicting how this Supreme Court
rules. So would you agree that that was never public money? Or do you say it is public money?
That's a question for the Supreme Court to decide.
Well, in your opinion. Your opinion.
I'm not a lawyer.
No, I know, but you must have an opinion.
I'm not a constitutional scholar.
I know what my opinion is, and I'm not a lawyer either, but I mean, I know what I think.
I'm not going to venture an opinion on that.
You're not going to give one on that?
No.
No? All right. That's your right. I'm trying to feel you out a little bit,
Understood.
you know, because it was controversial in Bedford, so much so that I don't know if you went to last year's deliberative session, but there were a couple of people who I believe very inappropriately got up lobbying at the session, when of course the deliberative session is supposed to be for us to hear about the budget and make comments and so on, not lobby legislation. Anyway, okay, but you answered. All right, my next question is this. Now, as you know, school taxes do continue to rise, and they are going up again this year with the school budget, which also means that all of our taxes are also going to go up. And I'm sure that, you know, there are a lot of folks in town not happy because of that. As a school board member, if you were elected, or if you want to answer it as a private citizen, who I'm sure has a high tax bill too, when you look at the school system, do you think that there are things that could be cut without losing actual, real educational benefit value to the kids?
So as a school board member, I would exercise the oversight of the school board and ask that question of the administration. And I would come back and say, you know, what's your budget? What's the default budget? You know, if you had to cut 5%, what would that look like? I think to date, the school board and the school administration have been relatively parsimonious. They've had, in these very difficult economic times, they've had flat budgets. In, I believe, 2010, 2011, they haven't added any teachers. They've had increasing enrollment during that time as well. And so this year, for the first time in about 3 or 4 years, they've begun to add back what they feel are important expenditures, capital expenditures, to take care of the physical plant and the brick and mortar. We all know that as much as we hate to put oil into the car or fix a roof in our house, it preserves the investment we have. So some of those expenditures, I think, are absolutely important. We have obligations with regard to retirement and health care.
Oh, granted.
And whatnot.
No, I'm
so
not
we
debating
have to do that. And in terms of the curriculum, you know, I'm not going to sit here and go through a budget. I don't know the curricular expenditures at this point enough to be able to say, oh, that's waste and that's not.
Well,
but as a school board member, I am a fiscal conservative. I really believe in returning value to the taxpayer, and I would be looking at that, and I would be asking those tough questions.
Well, I guess that I'm thinking in terms more not of not of building needs or of the cost of the educational programs. Right. I'm talking about the other things, the more fun things or the more extra things. I mean, we do spend a lot of money on sports programs. We do spend a lot of money on clubs and activities and so on. Right. Nothing wrong with them, but they're open to a lot of debate in terms of who should pay for what and all that kind of thing. Right now, we're paying for it. So if we got into cuts, do you think, oh, we're almost out of time, so just answer this fast. Do you think there's some potential for some cuts?
There's always a potential to look at a budget and see what are your wants, what are your needs, what do you have to do. So absolutely.
Okay. And I didn't mean to rush you there, but I try to give those last couple of minutes,
and
the time is gone. So what I will say is this. Let's turn the time over to you. If you want to say what you think is the biggest educational issue in Bedford is, feel free. I'd love to hear it. And anything that you think we missed on your background, or look at that camera and tell people why you should get their vote.
My name is Bill Kassler, and I'm running for school board. I am a 16-year resident. 16 years ago, my wife and I moved to Bedford, like many of you, for the reputation of the schools. And 16 years later, I have not been disappointed. We have a fabulous school district. We have a high-performing school district. We have a great school board, and we have a great school administration and fabulous teachers. I want to keep it that way. But I also know that you don't, in order to have high-performing school district, in order to have good education, you don't necessarily have to throw a lot of money at it. As a public servant, I have managed large units. I've managed units with over 200 staff, with multi-million-dollar budgets, so I know my way around a spreadsheet, and I know how to return value to the taxpayer. So on March 11th, I would sincerely appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Wow, you sound like you've done a lot of radio. You did that, and there's a minute and a half left.
I'm efficient.
I guess. Is there anything else you want to throw in?
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Wow, it was my pleasure to have you. I mean, we've never met. Well, I met you for like 3 seconds at the deliberative session when you come over to speak to somebody who was beside me. And I think that's when I said to you, so will you want to be on a Tell It Like It Is show?
I'm thrilled.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're here. And we actually, I can't believe it, we have a minute left. I want to wish you the best of luck, and on behalf of all Bedford residents, since we do have a minute to waste, not to waste, but you know what I mean, a minute extra. Thanks for stepping up to the plate, because, I mean, there's nothing that I think is worse than unchallenged candidates over and over, or nobody stepping up to run for an open seat. And it takes a certain amount of backbone to throw yourself into the public arena and recognize that if you get elected, there'll be some bricks and bats thrown at you along the way. So thanks for being one of the folks who's not afraid to do it.
Thank you so much.
All right, best of luck. Thank you. Well, everybody, another candidate down and with the interviews, and I think you pretty much got a sense of where Bill is. And again, once again, do not forget to go to the polls. Do your civic duty. Pick your candidates, get in there, and put those marks on the ballot. And keep on watching the series to get to know all of them. Until then, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.